Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you very much indeed for joining us at what is Valentine's time. And normally, Valentine brings all sorts of lovely thoughts about romances and rewarding each other, couples, married couples, and those who are courting and so on. But it really is different for Palestinians. And that is the purpose of today's meeting, is to hear about the obstacles to love, the obstacles to relationships that the Palestinians experience, not only in the occupied territories, but across what are seemingly a few kilometers here, there, and everywhere. So it's important to see the various dimensions that Palestinians have to deal with. And today, and I've just come back from being out and seeing all the red roses in supermarkets going at the rate of knots, but actually getting them from one place in Palestine to another is not that easy. So I'm very pleased to be hosting this particular session. And the sort of running order will be that we have a couple of fantastic speakers that will be introducing at different points in the next hour and a bit. And in between, there's a film which we will be showing as well, called The Present. And it's really timely that we're showing this because it's just been nominated for the Oscars. So it's quite an important reason, a second reason for showing it to you and sharing it with you. So without further ado, I'll introduce the speakers when they are about to speak. We start first with Elia Ghorbiah, who will be speaking to you for about 5 or so minutes, and then really wanting to hear your questions. That's really important. It is really the questions that, because things that might be natural to you, that you would do, are not so easy when it comes to dealing with this particular subject. So I'd very much like to hand over to Elia to give us a background introduction to some of the issues that we wrestle with as Palestinians. Elia.
Thank you so much, Kamel. My name is Elia, and I'm a journalist. I've been living in Qatar for 3 years now. I'm Palestinian from the West Bank. And the first information, whenever I introduce myself, I always say that I'm Palestinian, I'm from the West Bank. So people would know who I am and where I'm coming from. Israelis' apartheid policies are creating barriers to love. It's a bit complicated sentence. I would start from my personal experience. I grew up in my family and with an open-minded parents. When I started dating, my parents would ask the first question about the guy: where is he from? It's not because of his cultural background or any other thing. It's to know what kind of ID does he have. He has. So, and that's why the reason behind that is that so many Palestinians are unable to build their lives with their loved ones because they simply are banned from being at the same place when they get married. So let me start by giving you a brief overview of the types of ID cards in Palestine, since I'm talking about IDs. Palestinians are divided into ID categories and limited in where they can live and travel, and by extension, limited in whom they can love. Personally, I have a green ID. Green ID is the West Bank ID issued by the Palestinian Authority according to Oslo Agreement, which means that I can move around the West Bank cities, and I need a special permit from the Israeli authorities to enter Jerusalem or the cities of the occupied Palestinian lands in 1948. The other category is the blue ID, which is the Israeli ID, given to Palestinians who live in the occupied territory since 1948. And there are two types of the blue ID. The first one is with the nationality, the Israeli nationality, where Palestinians who have these kind of IDs, they have the Israeli passport and they cannot get any other passport like the Jordanian passport. And the other type of the blue ID is the blue ID without the nationality. It's more like permanent residency, where Palestinians who have this kind of ID have the Jordanian passport. And the third category is the Gazan ID, where people who have this kind of ID can only move around Gaza, inside the Gaza Strip. So basically, these three types of ID cards controls how much mobility Palestinians have, where they can live, and what rights they have access to. So in addition to many racist Israeli laws, there is a law that bans Palestinians who have blue IDs from being with Palestinians who have green IDs from the West Bank or Gaza through marriage. So this prevents the potential love and what may later turn into a marriage that brings the two partners and families together in one place geographically, as any two or couple or any two people live in a normal place. So I hope this gives you a little bit like an overview on the IDs and why we care about IDs and why we ask about IDs in Palestine.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Elia. I might have missed it. Did you say anything about Gaza's ID cards?
Yes.
Which are green again, yeah?
Yes, they are green.
Yeah.
But they are not allowed to come, of course, because of the siege imposed by the Israelis. They cannot move from Gaza to the West Bank, and they cannot go, of course, to the occupied lands in 1948.
So, I mean, we know that impacts a lot on education. So people who want to study at Birzeit University from Gaza can't go to Birzeit, and those who are from the West Bank can't go to the Islamic University in Gaza. We know that. But other occasions when Palestinians, say from the West Bank and Gaza, do manage to get married, and what happens then? I mean, I'll just give a bit of background. Of course, one of the things about Palestinians, Syrians, Jordanians, all the others, is that marriage from cousins is quite common. So if the family is split, like they are in Palestine, it's possible you will have a branch of the family in Gaza, a branch of the family in the West Bank. So the question is, do they manage to get married? What happens if they do?
So the couple needs to stay either in the West Bank or Gaza. So they have to decide. One of the families would let their daughter or son to live with the other partner in there. Mostly, I know a few cases where Palestinians from the West Bank went to Gaza and they are staying in Gaza, but they are not allowed to come back to the West Bank because of the siege, of course. They cannot see their family members, they cannot see their relatives, and also in other cases like couples or people who come from Gaza and stay in the West Bank, and they start their families in the West Bank where they cannot go back to Gaza. So they are stuck in one of those places, and one of the families won't be able to see their the children and the couple.
Yeah. So but my question really relates. Okay, so if let's say a man is from the West Bank and a woman is from Gaza.
Yeah.
So the woman in Gaza, she cannot go to the West Bank, can she? If they marry, it is the man who has to move to Gaza to live with her.
They can. It depends.
How would that? Who would give them permission? That's the thing. The how?
The Israelis.
Yeah.
The Israelis. Actually, the Israelis control all the entries and exit
points.
Exit in the West Bank and Gaza as well. So if anyone is able to move from West Bank to Gaza or from Gaza to the West Bank, they need a permission from the Israelis.
So what I'm asking is, does Israel give permission for a woman to move from Gaza to the West Bank to marry? That's really what I'm asking.
No, of course not. It's a bit tricky, even for me. When I went to Jerusalem for the first time, it's very similar. Going from the West Bank to Jerusalem is like going from Gaza. And from Gaza, it's even more difficult. You can get a permission to do some work for medical reasons, and that's how you get the permission to go from.
So what I hear, the reason I characterize it with the woman, say in Gaza, or the man is
Yeah.
that I hear that they sometimes have to resort to the person in the West Bank leaving to Jordan to
Yes.
go through Egypt and Rafah into Gaza, where they then have to live permanently, but they cannot bring their wife,
No.
sorry, husband, and whatever, they
Yeah.
cannot bring them back because they wouldn't be allowed through the Allenby Bridge.
Yes.
So that, I mean, I'm sure people listening will appreciate that this is all part of what you have to think about, rather than think about falling in love or developing the relationship. And I'll say a little bit about what happened with me at an appropriate time. And I live in the UK, so, but it's a different story. But that's the point, that between Gaza and the West Bank, there is a complete disconnect. Families, it's unlikely that cousins can get married, which is what, as I say, in the West Bank, it happens a lot.
Yeah.
The cousins marry, but not in Gaza. So if we look at the other divide, okay, you mentioned Jerusalem. So someone from the West Bank, from Bethlehem, which is only what, 15, 20 kilometers, if that, from Jerusalem, and they marry someone who has the blue ID, but the one without an Israeli nationality.
Yes.
So someone wants to marry, these two want to marry. One has the green card or the green ID in Bethlehem, wants to marry somebody from East Jerusalem with the blue ID card. What is the situation?
So let's say the lady is from Jerusalem and the man is from Bethlehem. They can be together, and they have three options. The first option is for the woman to move to Bethlehem and live with the man in Area A. The second option is for the man to go to Jerusalem, which is very difficult because they need something we call lam shamel, or in English it's family reunification, and it's really difficult to get because, of course, the Israeli authorities ban this kind of marriage, and it might take like up to 20 years. I know couples who waited for 20 years to get the lam shamel to be able to live together in Jerusalem. And the third option is to live in Area C, where Area C is where the Palestinian Authority is supposed to provide the services, and military, the Israeli control it, military, and people cannot build in that area without the Israeli permission. But on reality, Area C is a chaos because so many couples live legally there, but they don't get any services. They have problems with the IDs of their children. So it's a bit complicated, and it's more like slums in the West Bank. And it, like Kufr Aqab is an area, is a good example on this. So these are the three options, and the three options.
To place Kufr Aqab, if I may, because our viewers will not necessarily know. So just as you leave Kalandia checkpoint, if you're coming out from Jerusalem and going to Ramallah, what to your left is what used to be basically Jerusalem's airport, Kalandia airport. And then as you drive towards Ramallah, that's where Kufr Aqab sort of suddenly a huge growth in tower blocks, legal and illegal, in terms of even planning permission from, to build them. So that's even there. So that's Area C. Or in fact, it's Jerusalem. This is the some of them have Jerusalem IDs, but they're not counted as living in Jerusalem. So there are lots of complications like that. I've got a few questions for you. Sorry, you wanted to finish off, I think. I interrupted.
Actually, no, I think that's it. These are the only three options, and the three of them, none of the couple's families would accept that, because if the couple decides to go, if the woman, let's say, moved to Bethlehem to live with the man, she would lose her residency, and then she will need a permit to visit her family. And of course, as you know, in Palestine, we have these connections between families when a couple get married. So the families won't be able to visit each other.
Yeah.
So for our parents, the first question is, where is he from? So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, those who followed some of our comedy events will know that Amr Zahar from the States has this question where he says, people say to him in America, where are you from? And he says, I'm from Houston or something. And they say, no, no, where are you from? In other words, where do you really come from? And this is the question we have for the ID cards, in a way. Where are you from means what ID card do you have? And then the other questions flow from that. So as I say, there are a number of questions in the chat here that I'll bring to you. Maybe I'll read them all, and then you can answer them as you see sort of fit. As a journalist, have you ever had the opportunity to speak in Palestine of what you are exposing to us here? I mean, is there any possibility in the territory to give voice and generate dialogue of resistance to these potential couples who are separated by IDs and barriers? What is the justification by the Israeli government for this? Another question. And then for what reason would the Israelis allow people to travel from Gaza to the West Bank and back? I think you answered that. It tends to be more for medical reasons and so on. But the first two, have you spoken about this? And how do they justify this?
So yes, in Palestine, I've worked on so many stories like this. And trust me, there are so many other stories. I found so many couples. Actually, I found that talking about love is really the easiest way to explain what is happening to us politically. Because actually, once I was trying to pitch a story. I used to work as a freelancer video journalist in Palestine. And while I was trying to pitch a story, the producer was asking me if I'm single or not. And then I told her, so I'm dating this guy, but he's from Jerusalem, so no. And she was like, what? Why? And then I was like, okay, this is complicated. I'm gonna explain to you. And then I decided, okay, this is a good pitch. I'm gonna film this. And I filmed a story of a couple. They were my friends. They got married now, and they live in Area A. And unfortunately, the woman lost her residency, the blue ID, because she moved to live in Area A. And now she needs a permit to go to visit her family in Jerusalem. So yes, I've done so many stories on this. What is the justification by the Israeli government? They don't give us any justification. It's an occupation. For me, this explains a lot, and they don't give any justification. They just controls, and I think it's a strategy to separate Palestinians. The wall, all the racist policies, it's just to separate Palestinians. And I'm really sad to say that, but they are doing that really. Since I'm thinking about, yes, a guy has a different ID, okay, then I'm not gonna date him. The Israelis are doing it, what they are planning to do. So it's really sad. But trust me, Palestinians are really brave, and sometimes they just don't care. They are brave enough. Love needs courage in Palestine, and Palestinians have a lot of, or have plenty of it. You're muted, Kamel.
And that is why some of them end up saying they marry someone from Jerusalem, they go to Jerusalem, but they're illegal in the sense that Israel doesn't recognize they're there. They have children who end up with no ID cards, and if they manage to get to the West Bank, they won't allow them back into Jerusalem. So it's really complicated. But of course, an Israeli from Tel Aviv can marry someone from a settlement.
Of course.
Not only marry, but have lots of visits and celebrate, everything they want to. So, okay, I think we maybe pause at this point. Thank you very much indeed, Elia, and maybe other questions will come later. And we move now towards showing our film. I'm hoping that we are completely ready for that. So the film, as I said, it's a short film, 25 minutes. And it is, it's been nominated now for an Oscar. It's produced, directed by Farah Nabulsi, a Palestinian filmmaker. So we're really pleased to be able to show it to you tonight, and then we'll have an exchange after that. So over to our PSC media team to show us the film, please. Well, I think that was certainly for me a difficult watch, and this was the second time that I'd seen it. But it shows you how even a young child can come up with a solution to resist the occupation. And this is what happened here. People might say, well, yeah, this isn't real life, but if there's one thing you can say about the Palestinians, they don't give up, and they always find a way. That was me a difficult watch, and this was the second time I've seen it. I apologize, I had YouTube still on. Every time, for the second time, that moment when the child pushes the fridge, it just tells you, for goodness sake, this is a fridge. They could easily search it, but no. And I mean, this is apartheid. He said to him very clearly, the soldier in this clip, the road is not for you. Okay, the road is not for you. It is just this gate that's for you, which is exactly how the whole occupation translates itself in that. And I mean, when he says to him, it's just a fridge. And again, this is an example of lots of other things that in Gaza, for example, in the siege, I know we're not talking about that specifically, but things people take for granted, like A4 paper. It's just A4 paper. No, they're not allowed. So that is partly what part of the occupation that Palestinians feel on a daily basis. We'll come back to a bit more later. First of all, congratulations to Farah on the nomination of the film for the Oscars. We wish her well. Again, it shows you how powerful culture and media can be in bringing the true suffering of the Palestinians to life for people to see. Okay, what I'd like to do now is to move on to our second speaker, who is Dina Sayegh, who will be reflecting on her own personal story. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Dina, and for sharing your story, and I hand over to you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dina Sayegh, and I'm a trainee lawyer at the Community Action Center in Jerusalem. I'd like to talk about my experience. My mother is from Jerusalem and my father is from Gaza, and my story starts here. We were living as a family in Gaza until 2009. My mother used to live there based on a monthly period. She used to get it from the Israelis, which was renewed monthly. Every time she had to drag us as little kids to the border in order to renew her permit to stay in Gaza. Sometimes this used to take hours, from 5 to 6 hours at the borders. There was shelling, shooting. Sometimes she used to try to like protect us with her body, and even the renewal of the permit was not guaranteed. Sometimes they cancel it, and we have to go to Jerusalem immediately and stay there until granted a new permit to go back to Gaza. My parents tried to balance this for a long time, but they reached a point where they couldn't. As kids, we used to have anxiety, depression. They started noticing that we walk by walls at home. Near a wall, we don't act like normal children. So they took that hard decision, and they decided that it's time for us to leave, at least for a short period of time until we get better. We had to leave. We left my dad alone, unwillingly. We faced separation. We went to Jerusalem. which she tried to make family reunification for my dad for years until we got a reply finally from the Ministry of Interior stating that Gaza is a hostile entity and they can't accept the application. So based on that, our family reunification application was cancelled. My dad can't come. He comes on special occasions 2 times a year, and this is not guaranteed. It can be cancelled last minute by the Israelis. And for us, we can't visit Gaza. They consider us Israelis somehow, and we're not allowed to visit them. So we're still living like this since years. I'd like to talk a little bit about life in Gaza. It was horrible. They couldn't balance it anymore. And we felt like my mother felt like she can't handle, especially that when the year broke in 2009, one of our classmates died from fear. So this was what made my mom make her final decision. But from every cloud, there comes a silver lining because this is what motivated me to study law and to help people who suffer just like me. And I'd like to talk about a similar case that we worked on. There was a family. The man is from the West Bank and the wife is from Jerusalem. They were living happily and peacefully they had family reunification. Suddenly, one of the wife's relatives alleged an attack in Jerusalem. He was a far relative, and suddenly the Ministry of Interior decided to revoke their family reunification, and not taking in mind that he was the sole financial provider of the family, and they left them penniless until we went to the court. The court ordered the Ministry of Interior to revise its decision until recently we got a letter from the Minister of Interior himself. It was signed by him, not like the normal way, and like a person who works there sign. It was from the minister himself, stating that based on his wide powers, he's rejecting his application. And now the dad, the person is living without a job. This had impact on his children's mental health, and so on. So that's it. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much indeed, Dina. It is difficult to put years of this kind of living into 5 minutes, but you did it really well. Thank you very much indeed for that. Let me just check in the chat here. Let me also introduce myself. I'm afraid I failed to do that at the beginning. So my name is Kamel Hawwash. I'm the chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. My parents are from Jerusalem. They're first cousins. So this is why I mentioned the issue about cousins, that actually that used to be quite common. It still is, but not to the same extent. But again, listening to Dina here, if any of the children herself or the other siblings then had relationships with the other half of the family in Gaza, it would be difficult for them to be able to marry. That would be just a fact of the situation. And it's, in a way, it's compounded by social media in the sense that people do get to meet and to see each other and to talk and so on. So there is a chance that a couple could sort of form from different parts. But the reality is the color of your ID is what matters. And but also the issue about the reunification is quite a telling one that even after granting it, they can take it away. And that also applies more widely, while people think of questions for Dina, to people with a Jerusalem ID, full stop, because even without the issue of marriage, and I'll say a little bit about what happened with me because it's relevant in this context, but when Israel occupied East Jerusalem in 1967, and of course the West Bank, Gaza, and Sinai, and the Golan Heights, Palestinians in Jerusalem were given a special colored permit, which is the blue permit, which is given to Israeli citizens, but it is simply a residence permit. So it doesn't protect the presence of anyone in Jerusalem. And in fact, in past years, something like 15,000 permits have been withdrawn by Israel for all sorts of reasons. First of all, some of the Palestinian Legislative Council representatives who dared to stand in the election and be elected, they had their residency revoked and they were moved off to the West Bank. But in terms of people who have the residency permit, in order to maintain it, they have to show that Jerusalem is the center of their lives. That's the phrase that they use. And if it isn't anymore, they can take it away. So if a woman from Jerusalem wants to marry someone from the West Bank and move out there, at some point the Israelis can come and say, oh, you don't need the permit anymore. Jerusalem isn't the center of your life, even though she may have maintained, visits to family and so on. I'll just see if there are questions, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what happened with me. So if the person from Jerusalem goes to live with a spouse from Bethlehem or Area C, because Bethlehem isn't Area C, it's Area A, do they lose their right to return to Jerusalem for visits and their blue card? So that's what I was alluding to, that they judge your ability to maintain that card is predicated on Jerusalem being the center of your life. In other words, you live there, you work there. If you have a job in Ramallah and travel out there and back every day, they might still come a point where they take the ID card away. How does someone support themselves when they don't have a job in Palestine? Well, of course, first of all, families come together and try and help, but there's a limit, because when everyone is in need of sustenance in terms of money and so on, it is quite difficult. But what tends to happen, say, if someone does end up in Jerusalem who doesn't have a Jerusalem ID card, is they will find work, but they won't get the same benefits as other East Jerusalemites get. Because they pay taxes, they get services. But if you are not recognized as someone who is, if you like, from Jerusalem, they will not get the full services that the others do. And therefore, if they are ill, they either have to risk going back to the West Bank to get treatment or to pay for private medical services. There's a question for Dina. Thank you, Anne. In spite of anything you have been able to study to be a lawyer representing Palestinian clients, how was that possible? So I guess she's asking about, maybe how you, where did you study law? I might have missed that, but then have you been able to represent Palestinian clients? I think you have been. But if you could just explain to us the context of you said you chose law to help others. So say a little bit about the type of work maybe and the type of cases you've handled.
Okay. I studied at the University of Jordan and I came here. I really worked hard on my Hebrew because I had a goal. I really wanted to reach that point where I can represent clients in courts and help with their application process. We work on family reunification process, applications for the humanitarian committee, renewal of the family reunification, rejections to court, appeals. My work is in the field that I've always wanted to be in. It's related to the experience that that we went through. We also work on house demolishing.
Thank you very much indeed. That's really helpful. I'll just check again if, I mean, can you maybe tell us a little bit about Palestinian citizens of Israel, so those who hold the full citizenship, and whether you've seen cases, again, of sort of love crossing that divide, the apartheid wall, that they want to marry someone from the West Bank, and how that works. And indeed, could the partner from the West Bank go and live with them in Israel?
It's very hard. You have to file an application for family reunification, and they check you. They check that you don't have any relatives with security issues and issues with the police. Sometimes there was a case where someone they tried to steal from him, and he called the police, so he was involved, and it was in his file. They check you, it takes years. Like the application can take up to 4 years, 5 years. Today, someone came, he wanted to register his children. He needed help. He applied in 2005. It's like it took him years, and he's still applying. He's still trying. Every time they give him an issue.
Okay. In terms of the reason why you learned Hebrew, my understanding is you can either, you can practice as a lawyer in the Palestinian area, so you get that permit to practice there. But to practice law on the Israeli side, you need to get the license, the Israeli license to practice. So I guess is that why you needed to study Hebrew, or was it to be able to help? How does that work?
Yeah, I thought that I can help change a lot by studying here Hebrew in Israel. I thought that I will be able to make a change. It's more challenging. Afterwards, I'm planning to go and continue practicing in the Palestinian territories. But first, I want to make a change here. I really want to help in making it easier for families.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm just checking why we've got feedback. I don't know why we have some feedback on the line, but okay. So let's have a look. Is the system, do you feel there are similarities? I don't know whether you can comment, but with South Africa and apartheid in South Africa, in relation to this issue, to the issue of people, I don't know, you may not know, about relationships under that system, but I think that's the question. Let's be specific about relationships and love and so on in South Africa. Do you have anything you can add to that in comparison to the situation for Palestinians in the various places they are?
Yeah, of course, because the Israeli law discriminates against Palestinians based on their national and ethnic backgrounds, because it's not the same for Israelis who come abroad from France and from America. They can be together, they can get married. You feel like there's a different law for everyone based on their national backgrounds, not more. There are some laws that even differentiate between a person who was a Jew, for example, who was living abroad and who came here, and another law for the person who's from an Arab background and who came back, even in taking medical services and benefits, social benefits.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'll say a little bit about my story, just to, if you like, give a different perspective. So here it's about, say, a Palestinian with a European nationality as I have a British nationality, and I met through a traditional arrangement my wife about 11 years ago. So we were introduced to each other, and we, even before Zoom, we got to know each other very well on Skype. That's how we managed to get to know each other. And we counted that from the day we had been introduced until we were married, it took 3 months. So that's quite a record. But during that period, and I didn't know my wife at all, she was not related to me, but we were introduced and so on. During that period, while we were getting to know each other and so on, one of the constant questions that kept coming up from my wife was, yeah, but if I come to live with you in the UK, will I lose my ID card? Okay, that was, so think about what couples talk about when they're courting. There aren't many countries where they'd be talking about papers and paperwork, and that's what we talked about. And it actually was, it's a very difficult question to answer. However, the reality is, as you heard, for various reasons, Israel can withdraw the ID card when it wants to, because it considers the Palestinians in Jerusalem as residents, not as citizens. So, okay, after 3 months, I went to, we arranged everything before we met. We met on a Thursday, and we got our marriage contract signed on a Friday, and we were married on a Tuesday. So it was that quick. Now, the point about telling you this is the following. One of the questions also was, where do we hold the wedding party? Many of my relatives live in the West Bank. My wife's family all live in Jerusalem. So you would have thought the couple have the choice. Where do they want to hold the wedding reception? We didn't. If we wanted my family to attend, a lot of them, we had to hold it outside Jerusalem. So, so imagine you're discussing these things rather than saying, as you know, the bride wants the best place to have the wedding in and so on. But we ended up having to have the wedding in Azariya, which is just outside Jerusalem. And there is a market actually for marriage halls because of that, to allow people to, Jerusalem, people in Jerusalem, it's a short crossover to Azariya. So we married and so on, and then applied for my wife to have her visa to the UK, and she came. So the question we didn't discuss was, what if we have children? What happens then? So when in fact she was pregnant, we began to think, oh gosh, this is really quite an interesting question. Is there a difference between her having a baby, our baby in Jerusalem, or having the baby in the UK? Okay, so think about that. You're having to even, normally children get into they have the nationality from their dad, from their mom, not Palestinians, and certainly not a British Palestinian like me. So here this was the dilemma. If she had the baby in the UK, my son, as then we had the son, would get his British nationality, but he would not be in his mother's ID card. So he wouldn't be registered as a Palestinian, if you like, citizen who lives in East Jerusalem. The alternative is she has the baby in Jerusalem. What happens then is the following. It's unlikely the Israelis will, and when I say unlikely, they wouldn't have done, they wouldn't record him include him in her ID card, and he wouldn't have British nationality. We'd have to apply for him to be naturalized as a British citizen to come with her to the UK. So again, just think, instead of having, being really happy about getting married or being happy about having a child, you're having to assess how the Israeli apartheid, really, it is real apartheid, because they don't treat Jews like this, Jewish Israelis, it is only Palestinians. And so we decided to, we asked the question, well, okay, after he was born, and he was born in the UK, and he had his British nationality within, immediately. So the question was, how can we include him in his mother's ID card? And the answer from the Israelis was, oh, what you have to do is, you, as an I, would have to move to Jerusalem, to live there for 2 years, apply for reunification, And after 2 years, both you and your son would be, if you like, we would have Jerusalem ID cards. And as you heard, actually, that is not, even if in potentially or it is in theory it is true, it doesn't happen. So I would have had to disrupt my career to move to live in Jerusalem, and then to see how if they were kind enough to give us the right papers. So these are some of the questions. But to take it to the end point, in 2017, so I used to go and visit. My wife is from East Jerusalem, from the Mount of Olives. So, and we used to go regularly. And then in 2017, we had booked to go as normal, myself, my wife, and then my then 5-year-old son. And we got to Tel Aviv airport and they decided not to allow me in. So I was denied entry. But then they said to me, and this was probably the most difficult question, or it really angered me. You won't be allowed in. What will your wife do? Will she go in or go back with you? That's so. If you thought there was any exaggeration in the way that they treat people, no, this is what they do. And so, of course, my wife's family is there. She was going to go in. But imagine a 5-year-old boy with his mother sitting there, not understanding what's happening, except I'm bored, I want to go. And so they went in and I was denied entry and put on a plane back to the UK. They would not do that to a Jewish Israeli. They just wouldn't. But one of the sort of strange things was the officer who told me I wasn't going to be allowed in. When he said, "Will your wife want to go in?" She's an Israeli citizen. Of course, she isn't. She just holds the ID card. So I hope you're getting a flavor of the fact that for Palestinians, love, marriage, having children, everything, anything that you consider to be normal, to be natural, they interfere with, and they must put their stamp on things to show you who is boss. And that's really what they try to do. So I'll just see if there are any other questions. What can we do in the UK in support of the Palestinians and to spread the word about the situation we heard about today? Elia, would you like to? The question applies to anywhere, not just the UK, but certainly the UK.
I think at this point of our life and our struggle against occupation is knowledge. For me, knowledge now, to be aware of what we are going through on daily basis and to not normalize what we are going through. I think this is something important, because we're not fighting something only physical. We're not only fighting against soldiers and checkpoints. We're also fighting a whole narrative, and we are creating our narrative, and love is part of this narrative. So knowledge is a great weapon.
Thank you. I'll go to Dina for the final point, if she has any comments she wants to finish with.
Okay, as Elia said, knowledge is the best weapon, because most people don't know about what's happening. The media sometimes it doesn't reflect the right image, like through media, we're seen as terrorists, and Israel is seen as a country that defends itself. Actually, they use excessive power, and they don't take in mind that we are civilians and we want to live a normal life just like everybody in the world.
Thank you. That's a great point to finish on. We are normal human beings who have feelings, who love and want to have families and flourish. The Palestinians achieve greatly in terms of education and positions they hold all over the world. And if only we were able to be free to run our own affairs, I have no doubt that we will make a huge contribution to the world, not just to ourselves. So I want to thank our two speakers, Elia and Dina. It's been really great sharing this event with you. And for others, knowledge, and when we can travel, please visit Palestine and see the situation for yourself. We are 3 Palestinians telling you what it is, but when you see it for yourself, I am sure you'll come back and say, actually, Kamel, it's worse than you said. Thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.